Welcome to Spirits in the Theater. Today we're going to talk about how vampires suck. Remember to subscribe to this channel and potentially like this video. We have this interesting popularized genre in our culture today, basically around vampires. We have TV shows and movies and whole franchises built on the whole universe of the vampire. And growing up, I remember I was probably like 13 or 14. I was a freshman in high school. Went to a friend's birthday party. It was an all-dude, like, slumber party type situation, and we watched Dracula 2000. And I remember being kind of traumatized by that experience. I was shocked that all these dudes at this party, because several of them were like friends of mine from church. I was shocked that they like would even consider watching this movie, let alone like, I looked around and these guys were enjoying it. And like, it was my first real exposure to like vampires like violating people and sucking their blood and all this stuff. And I was like, this is horrible. And it was kind of traumatizing for me. And I was like, okay, I'm different than all these other people. Like, I hate this. This is disgusting. Like, how could they possibly be okay with this? And I just felt indignant and offended and shocked, and I hated it. And, you know, I think I just have continued to find language for my revulsion for this whole thing. I'm not like so turned off that I can't handle watching a vampire something. Like, I've watched my fair share of vampire things. I've actually enjoyed a show with vampires in it, vampires notwithstanding. The whole idea of a vampire is overtly demonic. The idea that there's a person, like in human form, biting the neck of and sucking the blood out of another human being and draining the life out of them in order for them to live or be powered up or whatever is disgusting. Like, that is such a violation of the right order of things. God did not intend for our blood to come out of our body, let alone be taken in that way, right? And used for its own whatever. There's the whole, like, in the demonic occult realm, blood sacrifice and all that stuff is a huge practice because the enemy likes to prey on, like, life is in the blood, right? And so, like, there's this whole, like, focus and fixation and obsession over our blood, and that thing being shed or, like, utilized as a resource or, like, preyed upon is dark. It's twisted, it's evil, it's perverse, and, like, it shouldn't be normal for us. It shouldn't be okay. Like, that's a problem. And so the whole, like, machination of a vampire in a thing is like, this creature is a villain. It's a bad guy. It's a problem. And so when we see characters being depicted as like heroes and this vampiric thing they've got going on is like a superpower, makes them awesome. I understand to some degree why that's appealing. I don't understand the like acceptance of the whole twisted dark nature of the whole idea. Like, craziness to me. It's a violating, oppressive, dominating dynamic that we shouldn't be celebrating. It's totally the opposite of life and the way that the Lord intended for us to function and operate and engage with each other. It's a violation of all those things. The vampire is the epitome of darkness personified in preying on the sons and daughters of God and taking something from them that they are not supposed to be taking. Like, it's gross. So anyway, I'm talking to people in my world, and like, that wasn't always a thing that they really cared about or understood or didn't really talk about it like that. But like, I'm like, no, to me, it's pretty clear. Like, this is very overtly displayed, and you know, we can look at all kinds of genres, all kinds of shows or movies that have these vampire characters, and the way that they're participating in the story or with the other characters, and most of it is nasty and twisted. Now, there's that whole conflicted, like, you know, human element and whatever, and there's a lot of, like, you know, some human falling in love with a vampire thing going on with, like, teen romance novels and whatever, but the whole idea of a vampire is overtly twisted and dark and perverse. I'm not saying, like, you shouldn't like vampire stuff necessarily, but that is a commentary that we thought we should put on this, in this series, to just kind of talk about the whole idea. That is a very real dynamic that is being portrayed and depicted in that is not awesome. It's coming from hell, from darkness, from evil, and it's there to like depict the value of taking, of violating, and especially the thing that's most precious, which is the blood flowing through us that allows us to live. What a twisted, horrible trope that we get to just like continue to see marching around through a bunch of the things that we observe and enjoy. There is a way for us to separate from that whole thing and not champion it or embrace it or, you know, go along with it. We can see that happening and not say yes to it. Like, I'm actually pretty appreciative of if a vampire is showing up in a thing. I love the supernatural element, and I love it when the vampire is portrayed as the villain, as a bad guy, and he's not being someone that we're attracted to or wanting to be like or we want him to decimate people, like when we recognize that he's a villain, that we want to overcome him, like that to me makes perfect sense. I'm like, that's great. Like that's a thing, right? It's when the villain, when the vampire becomes a superpowered ally that we depend on, but we just let him suck blood out of people or whatever so we can compensate for needing his strength in the thing. I'm like, yeah, this is a problem. Like we don't pull on demonic powers to try and get results. Like that's a really bad idea. We don't want to celebrate that or like run that around as a win for us. It's not. So when the storyteller actually divides the line appropriately and evil stays on evil's side, I'm like, okay, great. I'm fine with the vampire thing. It's not a big deal. And especially if we're not like glorifying the vampire sucking scenario. I don't want to sit there and watch this creature of darkness drain the lifeblood out of another human being. Just even seeing that displayed there's something very twisted about that. Like just observing it, like it shouldn't happen. And so that person playing the victim and allowing themselves to portray and depict the life getting sucked out of them and them succumbing to or submitting to the oppressive power of evil, like that is wrong. It should not be glorified. I understand we can show it to get a point across, but to glorify it and draw it out, like I've got a problem with that. I'm like, this is dark and perverse. And so I guess one of the things I want to say in this is like, you guys, first of all, subscribe to this channel. Don't forget that if you want to see other videos coming up with this, subscribe to the channel. But one of the things I want to point out is be mindful when that stuff's being displayed, and in your own heart, draw a line. Like even if the storyteller is portraying this as a positive thing, be mindful of that for yourself and disengage from that idea. Don't celebrate and swallow that whole. Like recognize there's a distinction here and like you're not getting on board with that thing. I don't know that we need to be fearful or paranoid about this and like, I can't see anything with a vampire in it. I'm not saying that. But, depending on how they display and explore that whole idea, we want to draw our lines in the sand with us being on the side of the human being's form and frame is to remain intact. We don't want to celebrate the violation and the oppression and the victimization of a life. Like, that's not awesome. And their blood should stay in their body. So if it's getting a point across, I get it, let's move on. If it's being glorified and, like, exaggerated, like, yeah, we've got a problem. I'm not sure that we should be watching that kind of stuff. It's not good for our souls. So you guys, vampires, like, straight up, demonic origins, not awesome, not heroes. Be mindful as we're absorbing that stuff. Like, that's not a great thing. I'm not trying to, like, just ban everything vampiric. But the nature of a vampire, that where that's coming from in the spirit is straight up demonic. It's evil. Just know that, be mindful of it, and govern yourself accordingly, all right? And remember, guys, when you're watching a movie, you're never alone. Like this video, subscribe to this channel. Any thoughts on vampires? I know some of you feel very strongly like, yes, vampires are gross. Some of you love vampires. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Comment below.